So first of all, who in here has no understanding of who the Allman Brothers are? Just raise your hand.
There's one.
All right, good.
Two.
Okay. Who knew who the Allman Brothers were in March of 1971 when there was something going on? We have one hand go up, right? Two people in this whole thing. Three. Are y'all afraid to raise your hands, or none of you guys knew? The lady here said you were a senior in high school, had no recollection of it. Okay. So Bob Beatty is my name's Bob Beatty, and I do work in state and local history. And I'm going to do a quick moment of personal privilege for Carrie, for the Historical Society, for this community, because I have spent my life in state and local history, local organizations like what Carrie runs. They are the backbone of the historical profession of this country. These are some of the hardest working people, volunteers and otherwise. Very low pay. And a lot of it has to do with just what you care about and doing it. And so I want to literally tip my cap to you. Can you give them a hand, please? All of them. Bigger than that, please. Come on, these folks do that. Thank you. I want to hear it going. Just a little bit. All right, Allman Brothers Band. This is really, where do I start? Duane and Greg Allman were baby boomer era kids. Y'all probably understand the baby boom. Looks like a lot of you guys were part of this. This is coming out of World War II. Veterans come home, and we have a legit baby boom. We're in the middle of the opposite right now. But times were so good, and people were feeling so great. War was over. Economy was booming. Youth had money for the first time ever in human history. Youth had money to spend. And where did they spend it? Many of them spent it on rock and roll and pursuing music. So the Allman Brothers are kind of the third generation of Southerners to make rock and roll music. That first generation, it's really Elvis, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino. Y'all know, I mean, this is all in this area, certainly along the Gulf Coast, where all the music venues were and stuff like that. They were the first to really meld rhythm and blues music with country music, which also has a very much a blues tinge to it, and they formed what we call rock and roll today. The second batch of those people were the teen idols, Bobby V and Fabian and Frankie Avalon. This was when the music industry said, man, this rock and roll stuff is really good. Let's package it like we did the old pop stars, Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. Let's get these clean-cut dudes. A lot of them are Italian or Jewish, and they give them very Anglo names, and they go out and perform. And it took a lot of the life out of the music. Anytime the music industry kind of comes in and takes over. And what happens is the Beatles break. And any of you who lived that generation as well, when the Beatles break in America in 63, really 64, that changes everything on the landscape. Because the American, outside of the Beach Boys in California, the American music industry was pretty much dead. Southerners, all of us had to leave the South to make it. You did not stay in the South to play rock or rock and roll music. The closest thing you would do is go to Nashville, and that was what? Country music 100% of the time. Well, most of the time. The Allman Brothers had this similar journey. So they start in the mid-60s playing in these rhythm and blues bands. They're playing songs like Mustang Sally, now I'm losing all the names. They always had Beatles songs in their repertoire, Stones, etc., in Daytona Beach. And then their first out-of-town booking agent they sign with has them start the Stork Club over in Mobile. So really their first out-of-town gig, and it's in the book. I know there's some young people here, but Greg called it a nasty blanking place. I used the full words in the book, but I will not use this in polite company on a Sunday in Jackson, Alabama. But that was their first beginning. They toured on the road, Stork Club in Mobile, and the Allman Brothers themselves had a long journey to success. This is about 1964, 65. Duane is the older brother, drops out of high school. Their mother, single mother, says Greg has to graduate high school, so Duane waits until his brother graduates in 1965. They go on the road. They're a band at that time called the Allman Joys, after the candy bar. While they are with the Allman Joys in Pensacola, they eventually join forces with a group called the Sandpipers, which is an all-girl group, interestingly enough. They go to New York City to audition, fail miserably. The Sandpipers actually get picked up and signed, but never make it. Then the Allman Brothers, after New York, in summer of 1966, they go to Nashville. They sign under the tutelage of John D. Loudermilk and are trying to make it again. Put out a record, fail miserably. 1967, they get picked up and they go to Los Angeles as part of a group called the Hourglass. And they spend 2 years out there. Again, fail miserably, release a couple of records. All of this is in the book. 1968, Duane Allman is 21 years old. He leaves Los Angeles in a fit and returns to Daytona Beach. Ends up in Jacksonville, Florida for a bit, and then he ends up in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And that's really where everything comes together and the story comes together. I'm leaving a lot out. There's an entire book that covers all of this here to keep you interested at least. But Duane, so a couple things I want to tell you and then I'll get to your point here. Duane shows up there, Northwest Alabama. In Alabama, I know I'm in the state. And works his way onto a Clarence Carter session first with Rick Hall. A couple months later, Rick Hall calls him up, sends a telegram actually, and says, "Please come. I've got a Wilson Pickett session that I want to have some guitarists on." If anybody was alive in early 1969, and was of age where you were listening to the radio, you would have heard Wilson Pickett's "Hey Jude" all over the radio in spring of 1969. With this incendiary guitar solo at the end, going toe-to-toe with Wicked Pickett. From that guitar solo, Duane Allman gets a contract, first with Rick Hall, then that contract gets bought out by Macon's Phil Walden. Phil Walden had managed before that Otis Redding. I hope I see names, people nodding. I mean, this is big-time Southern music royalty. But here's the thing, Duane didn't write songs. He didn't sing, and he didn't have a band. So this whole arrangement in spring of 1969 was this dude with 0 prospects and a fat contract puts a band together. And here's how that band works. The first guy to show up is J. Johnny Johnson, J-Mo, African-American drummer. Automatically, the band that is all going to be playing black inflected music, now has an African-American in it from the get-go. I just want to tell y'all, and I mean, I can fast forward 2 years to what happened here, 50-something years and a month ago, 53 years and a month ago, right? That's some scary stuff to be traveling around with long hair and be traveling around with a black dude together, right? So I just want to say, J-Mo comes out and moves in with Duane, which is also on Lake Wilson, I think. Is Lake Wilson in this area? Am I correct? Oh no, Lake Wilson's up there. I keep confusing myself. They moved to a cabin together up there in Northwest Alabama. Not in Northwest Alabama. And they begin playing together in Muscle Shoals, and they are joined by a bass player named Barry Oakley, who's in a band called The Second Coming out of Jacksonville, Florida. Duane has been kind of courting Barry for a number of years. They ran across each other in Florida. Barry is in a band in The Second Coming with a guy named Dickie Betts. And timing is what it is. Dickie died, I guess, a week before last. Rest in peace. And Dickie is a hotshot guitarist in The Second Coming. Well, Duane's already a hotshot guitarist. Why do you need a second lead guitarist? Nobody quite understands this as the band comes together. Eventually, Duane quits Muscle Shoals, drives to Jacksonville, picks up with J-Mo, picks up Barry, picks up Dickie Betts, picks up Butch Trucks as a second drummer. Wait a second, he's already got one drummer. Now he's got 2 lead guitarists and 2 drummers. This is weird. And then he calls his brother Greg, who's still in Los Angeles, and says, "Hey man, I got it really cooking. We got 2 lead guitars," and Greg's like, 2 lead guitarists? And he's like, "We got 2 drummers. And he says, "I want you to come back here and round it all off and send it someplace." So the Allman Brothers form in March of 1969 in Jacksonville, Florida. It is those 6 gentlemen that I told you about, all with very diverse backgrounds, heavily in Southern music, ranging from rhythm and blues, rock and roll, country, jazz, a lot of psychedelic music, etc. It's this massive melting pot of talents and traditions, all of them Southern. And the final thing I'll say is that band stays together for a little over 2 years, including their inadvertent stay here in town. And in October of 1971, right as the album At Fillmore East is coming out, Duane is killed in a motorcycle accident. 1 year and 11 days later, 1 year and 13 days later, Barry Oakley is killed in a similar event right around the corner from where Duane was killed. And the story of the band for me is a story of resilience. So I have a blog called Long Live the ABB, and I write about this stuff all the time. I'm one of those nerds, thinks about it all the time. But the fact for me is why we're here and why we continue to be here is the albums, the music they put out, but also that they continued going after their two leaders had died. So it's a rock and roll Hall of Fame band, sold millions of albums, more or less stayed together for 45 years, had a bitter divorce with Dickie Betts in 2000, but has created a legacy for Southern music. Out of this comes the genre that we call Southern rock that becomes extremely popular in the 1970s. They really led the way for all of this. So it is, one of the most significant bands in American history, certainly of their era and of their generation. They led the Southern counterculture and the charge for Southern youth. And I will say, y'all are from Alabama. You know the songs that Neil Young was singing about the South, and they answered those calls. What other people were saying, the Allman Brothers did, by the music that they played, the company that they kept, and how fierce they were to the commitment to both of those things. So that's what. I don't know if that was even quick. Everybody's still paying attention, so maybe it was quick enough for y'all. That's a really quick overview of the history. The book is about the album At Fillmore East, which is really, if that record hadn't succeeded when it did, I don't think we'd fill a room full of people talking about Duane Allman because he died so soon afterwards, So my book is a certain time period, with a little bit of epilogue in it and a little bit of me in it, but for the most part, it's about that founding era. And the rest is here, including the article from your quarterly that I was able to reference a couple years ago. I think the first one would be is down in this area of the country. So J-Mo's from Gulfport, Mississippi. J-Mo would often come down and play the clubs down along the Gulf Coast. The Allman Joys did as well. Duane made his name at fame, really. Alabama is absolutely essential. We're not in Northwest Alabama where all that happened, but y'all have to, you look at that map, like, where did all this come from in this? And I know the documentary says it's in the water, which is kind of, okay, but I'll tell you, really what I think about, and I've thought about this a lot, Alabama and the South. One of the things that happened in this era was the federal government had lots of installations. It was between NASA, between the TVA up there in the upper Northwest Alabama, military installations, colleges and universities. They were really funding a lot of that. And this is a small town South story. These are not people who come from the big city in the South, which is going to be like Nashville, I suppose Jacksonville to some extent, Miami, Atlanta, y'all know the bigger cities. This is all like Daytona Beach and Orlando and it's not necessarily Jackson, but Jackson, and all those towns up there up around Muscle Shoals. That's the dam. That's where it all kind of begins for that. So with those two things, one is being they toured through here quite a bit. I just ran the map to see why they ended up going through here on their way from New Orleans to Mont Valley. It's there because the thing I said to Carrie was, I don't know why they didn't just keep going, like they know better than to stop in some small southern town at 9 o'clock in the morning looking like pirates, they should know better. I certainly would, I would think. So, this was they toured a lot through here. They avoided Jackson and I think all of Clarke County for the rest of their lives because I think their bonds are still open, right? They skipped, if I recall. They paid their bonds and said, we're never going back. So, and then the musicians, of course. So really, happy birthday today, Chuck Lavelle, Tuscaloosa's own piano player who replaced Duane in 1972, stepped into that role. Paul Hornsby is from that area as well, was a big-time producer and had been part of their band. Johnny Sandlin
I think he's from up in the Shoals area. But Johnny Sandlin was also a bandmate of theirs, and then later a producer at Capricorn. The roots of Alabama, of this state, are very, very, very deep in this story. Very much so. And by the way, Ramblin' Man, Dickie Betts' most famous song, pulled from Hank Williams Sr., his Ramblin' Country Man song. That's literally where he got the name. So it's all the way down. That's their one big hit. Number 2 in 1973. You know who kept them out? Recorded, by the way, at Shoals Sound. Cher. Half-breed. So ironically, right, 2 years later, Greg marries Cher, and she's who keeps the Allman Brothers out. I just think it's like one of those little factoids. Yeah, it's always something. And if any of you have seen any music documentaries or anything else, LA is a production method, kind of the way that they do things. And when the Allman, they were called the Allman Joys. They get signed. They go out to LA and are renamed Hourglass. That's the name. And they're dressed up. Carrie's right. Like, they were in psychedelic finery. There's one picture that I'll post every now and again on my social media. Duane has basically a doily around his neck. I mean, it just looks weird. They look like they're all dressed up in these weird psychedelic clothes. So in LA, the record label had seen Greg. I was like, oh, this dude's good looking, and he's got pipes, and he's got this blonde hair, and he's got all this charisma. So they were trying to make him the front man. And Duane was like, hey, I'm here too, and he was a really good guitarist. So they come to Muscle Shoals and record demos as Hourglass in 1968, and they're at Fame. They're at Fame because Johnny Sandlin, who's in their band, has encouraged them. He has a relationship there, and they record these demos and they go out and they just love it. They're having such a good time because in the South things are a little looser. They're not as corporate. This is an independent studio in Northwest Alabama. And they do things the way that we do things differently down here. And certainly at that era, the recording industry in the South is so less professionalized. I think it's a matter of that comfort level with your people and who you are at home. And the South, y'all, is a big, 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 big part of this story. All 6 of the original Allman Brothers 5 of the 6 are from the South. Barry Oakley is actually from Chicago, but the story is, as I quote, he came down south as soon as he had enough sense. That's the story that he says. We can all laugh about that, right? Because we're Southerners. But so they have this kind of deep sense of place, and they have failed. They've gone to New York and flopped. They've gone to Nashville and flopped. They've gone to LA, and really this was their last shot. And they said, we're just going to do it our way. And the mix of talent, and then of course when they found Phil Walden as their manager, and he began to support them, they were able to grow their music and their sound outside of the pressure of having to record and sell hits and get on AM radio, which they had, all 6 of them had failed at various times. So, I think it's a combination of the way that they did things at Fame was vastly different than LA or New York or even Nashville, and it was just more comfortable. And Duane, the quote he says is something about, I just wanted to get all that jive Hollywood crap out of my head. And is there any better place to do that than the South? We pretty much are the opposite of that, still to this very day. So I think it was a matter of getting home. And you have to remember, Duane's career is like 1967 to 71. 67, he starts recording with Hourglass, and 71 is when he dies. It's a really short, meteoric career. And the South was pivotal. When he comes back home, that's when he makes the music that he's most famous for. Quick note, y'all. So I'm writing the book, and I realized that I want to keep the sex and drugs out of the story as much as possible. I want to keep the money issues. I really want to focus on the music, because a lot of people had told these stories. So I wrote the whole thing, and I had an editor look at it, and I realized, wait a second. In April of 1970, so about a year before this, Twiggs Linden, who was their road manager and had been road manager for Otis Redding and also for Little Richard, actually, for a time. So Twiggs, been around. Twiggs in Buffalo, New York, goes to get payment the next morning, and the guy refuses to pay him, so Twiggs pulls out apparently a very sharp fishing knife and proceeds to fillet the gentleman and kills him. Ray Aliotta was his name. He was connected with the mob in Buffalo. Twiggs stayed. He did not flee. The cops kept a couple other witnesses who were there to get gear. The band continues on, and Twiggs, super long story short, ends up not guilty by reason of insanity. Being on the road with the Allman Brothers literally cooked his brain. He served a year, and I think the dude he killed wasn't all that popular anyway, because he was a connected mob guy. And so he served a year in a mental hospital, correctional institution kind of thing up outside of Buffalo. That happens a year before this event. The event that happens here then happens May, and it is a week, no lie, after they record this concert, which my book is about, and that blew me away. I put those stories back in because I realized, like, I have to tell these stories, but I didn't want to focus on them. And Sue, my editor, was like, thank God you put those in. Like, your book would have had a big hole. Like, it was dangerous. It was dangerous, period. And not because the road manager was stabbing people and not being paid, and not because they were showing up in a diner in the morning wasted and, public menace, I guess is what you might call it. Is that what we called it back in the day? Like, you're disturbing the peace, I guess, right? Extremely much. But, that they avoided more of that. And there are lots of incidences throughout where they had fights. Lots of incidences either over the white dudes having long hair or having a black dude in the band. That was a continual issue for them really throughout this era. And I'll be honest, I know we're not going to focus on y'all's story here today, but, I can only imagine, and I think I read it, I know I read it in your piece, how scared J-Mo was when that happened here. J-Mo being the African-American in the band. And that's a story that they said, that I know is in that circuit. They moved all of the white guys into the jail where J-Mo was. 1971 is not 1951 or 41 where, but it's still not, you're not sitting there going, oh, great, I'm in jail in Jackson, Alabama at 10 o'clock in the morning, drugged out, So this was a continued, but what is so weird is, seriously, in about 6 months, they're traveling in big old buses. They're not driving through anywhere, right? They're just sleeping on the bus while people, but back then, they're still driving the cars. Because they were a nobody band-ish. They had bags and bags. What I put in the book was, I called it a pharmacopoeia. Because that was the best SAT word I could use to describe the amount of drugs and different drugs that they had on their possession when they got busted. So they had released 2 studio records in 1969 and 70, and they really hadn't broken through. And so the band, they made the decision, we're going to record live. And the reason they said is because that's our natural element. And really throughout the book, I pepper it with quotes that really support this, because it was a common refrain for the band. So they go to New York, they record 4 shows over the weekend. The weekend before, they spent some time in Jackson. Basically, parts of 3 of those shows end up on the album. Why does it still resonate? I think number one, it is a clear documentation of Duane Allman's artistic vision, and people like that. And when I say artistic vision, I mean the band as well as the music that they were playing, because that is a big band, 6 parts, all of them communicating, talking in the moment. They're all improvising all the time. When you listen to that record at Fillmore East, they are composing in the moment. There's not a single overdub on that album. What a lot of live albums from that time are, a lot of live albums, period. They would go and fix notes, fix vocals in post-production, in the studio. None, 0. Not a single overdub on that album. They patched 2 versions of You Don't Love Me together, and they took out a harmonica solo in Stormy Monday. It is 78 minutes of brilliantly played music composed in the moment. I find it to be, they are one of the most conversational groups. When I listen to them and I listen to that record, they are talking to each other constantly. And when you listen to as much as I have, which is a lot, I wrote a book, and I've been consuming this for years. I'm still hearing different things at different moments. There are times when the bass will be spurring the rhythm guitar, sometimes the drums, sometimes the action, most of the times the soloist. It endures because it's a very, very well-conceived album. It was brilliantly recorded. Tom Dowd captured that room beautifully. In the quiet moments, You Don't Love Me, where Play All Night comes from, 1618 in You Don't Love Me. Listen for it today when you're done. I mean, you're in New York City. I don't know how many of y'all have been to New York City or concerts, but I just want to say New York has a continual murmur to it. You ever been to New York? There's a lot of energy in New York City. Rooms like this they're popping. And when a band is playing, that crowd is on edge and they're listening. And on this record, when the band is quiet, that crowd is whisper quiet. They're listening so intently. And I think, to get to your question, Carrie, that carried over to us. That was the key, was we want to put a record out that sounds like us on stage, because that's where they were known and did their best work. And it worked. And there's a couple other factors. They released it as a double album for a single album price. That was a trick, because they said this is the people's band, and music's for the people. They had a massive marketing campaign for it afterwards. They, in between time recording the record and releasing it, they closed Fillmore East. They still hadn't had a hit record yet. So, they were on the cusp. People knew them, people expected them. They were looking for this record. It came out. It was like this perfect storm of everything. And then, of course, 6 weeks later, Duane's dead. And it changes everything for them and really for the rest of the story. I got kiddos in here. It's a dang good record. It's a beautiful, brilliant record. And it does still resonate and stays timeless. Plus, if you play guitar, it's loaded with licks. Who plays guitar in here? We got some guitarists in here? Just a couple of you guys willing to raise your hand? I mean, it's endless licks that can confuse you and inspire you all at the same time. Duane and Greg were estranged when Duane put the band together. They were not on speaking terms. It had been about 6-8 months, and it was because Greg hightailed it back to LA, where he had a record label waiting to promote him as a star, and apparently he's pretty popular with the ladies out there too. And so Duane was really mad at him. And yes, Duane. There's several threads to this story, but one was they had to convince Duane to call him. J-Mo says Duane all along said, there's only one person who can sing in my band, and that's my brother. But he did have to be convinced. Now, back to your other story. Greg shows up to Jacksonville. They're playing. And apparently Greg walks in. The quote Dickie says is, walks in, goes up against the wall, goes, Jesus Christ, what a band. And then says to Duane, I'm not sure I can cut this. This is a really good band. And apparently Duane pulls him aside, the story is. Says, you little, because Greg was the little brother. How dare you? I got all these nice people here telling them how great you are, and now you're too afraid to sing. Apparently Greg goes, count the damn thing off, and he gets started, and that's where it goes. But you're absolutely right. He had to be convinced to call Greg, and Greg at first was a little reluctant or was a little unsure, because that's a good band. He walked into a room full of killers right there. Good question. Can I say something real quick about Dickie Betts, since we really haven't talked about that? So Dickie Betts died, last week before last. And I, as a human and as a fan, am really pleased to see all of the love and respect that Dickie got. Dickie was Duane's partner. And when you read my book or you read anything Dickie has to say about Duane Allman, their relationship was really, really, really intimate and special. And Dickie had a very hard time as an artist. Hard time might be the wrong word. I don't think he ever found that same. He played beautifully with a lot of other people, but there was something going on really with the two of them. And the fact of the matter is, Dickie was the leader of that band from the time Duane died until the time Dickie left the band in 2000. So I do just always want to give I can give a love to all of those guys individually, but since we just lost Forrest Richard, I figured I would give a little plug. Dickie wrote really some of their most famous songs in memory of Elizabeth Reed, which I'm repping today. Jessica, Blue Sky, Revival, of
course, Ramblin' Man, and a whole bunch of songs when they got back together in the 90s. He was pretty much their primary songwriter as well. Yes, whether or not you're interested in the Allman Brothers or not, I did my best to try to tell a story that was just interesting, period. History's all about contingency, it's all about if-then, it's all about context, and trying to place this story within the story of their lives and of their times was really important to me, because I'm a local. When it all comes down to it, I do what you do. I do what I live in a local community, and I study history really from that level forward. And this is a local history story that happened in this place. Big part happened in this place, but it happened all over, peppering all throughout the South. And I've been to a lot of these places. In fact, I finished writing this book in Muscle Shoals on the 50th anniversary of Duane's death. Total accident. It was just the way timing went. But I was like, I need to go where this story happened. So I got a little Airbnb and placed myself in there and finished that last draft. Because really, I connected with myself as a Southerner very much as I wrote this book too. Thinking about where I'm from, the people I'm from, where this story fits in, and into all of that. So yes, we will talk about that PhD. It can be done. It can be done.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.